As Sulagna mentioned, the topic for today's discussion is understanding and appreciating women at workplace. Over the last several years, this theme about women at workplace and how do we empower more women, encourage more women to stay on in the industry, build successful careers, these have become themes of great importance and interest to everybody. Several organizations, the government bodies, legislations, all of these have been supporting this cause extensively, as a result of which today we have seen a surge in the number of women who stay on in the industry. Not only there is a surge in terms of number of women who are joining the industry, but the number of women who have managed to build successful careers, stay on despite various challenges they face from time to time, both at workplace as well as at especially managing both family and workplace. We have seen there is a surge that has happened there, and we have also seen lately significant number of women rising to the top and breaking the glass ceiling, so to say. Of course, we still have a very long way to go in terms of getting to have a balance in terms of leadership level, a number of men and women we could have at the senior level in different organizations. We still have a long way to go. As many of you are aware, at the board level, now we want to see more women being represented. That still seems to be a challenge, and very soon this situation should also turn or change, we hope. But while we are hoping to see this transition and this transformation take place, one way or the very important way by which we can encourage women in large numbers to join the organizations and contribute significantly is by possibly understanding and appreciating women for what they can bring to the organization, what capabilities they possess, and particularly what is the kind of organization environment that we want to build where women feel more comfortable. I mean, that is not to say that we should be doing this at the expense of pampering women or trying to give them special privileges, but it is only the question of the fact that women in large numbers working in organizations is a very recent phenomenon, and this is a phenomenon that organizations are trying to grapple with. Both men and women, for them this is a first time experience to see that they are able to relate to one another in this context, especially certain new roles which have opened up. We might have in the past large number of women reporting into men. Today we have both men and women playing different roles and having each other reporting to one another. So all of these have created very different kind of dynamics in the workplace. So this calls for understanding, I would say to some extent definitely how women are relating to these issues, but more importantly we must also understand how men relate to these issues, and what kind of responsibilities each other, both men and women, have at workplace in terms of creating a completely different kind of a work environment which is positive, which takes advantage of each other's strengths and creates a different kind of energy in the organizations. So in this context, I would like to begin by mentioning a little bit about what I think could be the golden rule for success. And when I say golden rule for success, this could be applicable for both men and women. But in today's discussion, I would like to spend a couple of minutes talking about the golden rules for success for women, and then we can of course talk about whether those are relevant for men as well. I would think the first and foremost rule for a woman to be successful at the workplace is to recognize the fact that the woman should come into the workplace without any baggage whatsoever, and without the expectation that the woman needs to be treated differently or has to be treated as a special human being just because of the gender. When we are ensuring that there is a level playing field for everybody, then begins a completely different environment where we can begin to see that there is a benefit coming to the organization. And when women come into workplace without any expectation, when I say expectation, of course, when you say, well, I must get my maternity leave, I must be able to balance my home responsibilities along with my work responsibilities. I guess those are important, particularly balancing work-life balance, etc., is important both for men and women. But in terms of work-specific responsibilities, I believe that the golden rule for success for a woman who's especially very keen to rise in her career and make a success in terms of reaching to the very top of the organization, she should be prepared to put in as many hours of work as men do. She should be willing to travel as much as men are able to do. She should be able to take on any kind of assignment without any kind of hesitation. That is what I mean when I say there should be no expectations or no baggages. And that's when you say, well, you treat me as an equal and give me the same kind of equal opportunity for building my career and making a success in the organization. So that is my take on how a woman should be looking at, if I were to say the golden rule, this would be the very first rule or the very first success factor for a woman who's aspiring to be a career professional. The second golden rule would be to focus and try and become a specialist or build expertise at least in one area. You may be a marketing manager, you may be a manufacturing manager, you may be HR manager, it doesn't matter. But in whatever role, whatever capacity that you are currently handling your responsibility and whatever you want to become eventually, there is something unique about you. There is something very, very special about you which you have to discover for yourself. And once you are able to discover that talent or that competence, try and make sure that you are able to work upon that as time goes by and build upon it so that over 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, you become recognized, you become known for that quality that you have been able to exhibit time and again. So this becomes something like your walking stick. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, that capability will continue to build confidence in you. When I mention about this sort of a competence building, the question that some of you may ask is, isn't that so for men as well? I presume, yes, this is important for men as well. But I wanted to just highlight this aspect, particularly in the context of women, because many times women have a tendency to believe that they can be successful only if they emulate men's capability or what men become known for, and we try and emulate that, and unless and until that happens, we can't be successful. That is why I specifically called out this particular perspective for us to be reminded of the fact that in women there are certain unique capabilities. It is important for us to discover and celebrate those qualities and see if one of those qualities can become can contribute towards your own uniqueness and your own success. For instance, women are known to be very good at multitasking. Women are very good, very often they are found to be very good in coaching others. They are found to be good in terms of handling conflict situations. I've just given 2 or 3 capabilities which are more predominantly found in women as compared to men. So if you think any one of these capabilities you have the potential to be very, very good at, latch on to it, feel good about it, and use it to the hilt, use it to the maximum, so that over a period of time that becomes ingrained in you and can become a very strong weapon in terms of how you want to shape your career. The third rule for success is to make sure that whatever may be the kind of challenges that we may face along the way, when I say challenges, challenges in terms of time and challenges in terms of expectations from the society or your family, whether it is, there could be disruption on account of disruption of work because of marriage, because of childbirth, because of attention required by other family members. and so on and so forth. From time to time, we will find such challenges, which are once again something that both men and women face, but very often women feel that it is primarily their responsibilities to deal with some of these expectations. And we have a tendency sometimes to shoulder all of these responsibilities only upon, consider them as our own responsibilities and not something that could be shared with others. So the third golden rule, and the last one that I would like to highlight here, is to remember that come what may, if we are focused on our goal, that we want to build a successful career, that successful career does not necessarily mean that you need to have an unbroken record of 25 years, 30 years of service in the industry alone. You could be taking a break. In today's context, you could be working from home, you could be building a small enterprise, you could be doing part-time work, and so on and so forth. That sort of a focus to see that I can do something with my life, I can work around various demands on my time and still build a successful career, is something that one should believe in right from the beginning of one's career, so that when you look upon your own track record 25 years later, when you're at the age of 40 or 50, and look at what you have given to the society, what you have given to the economy, what you have given to the country and the world at large, you should feel proud of the fact that you have also contributed something economically, socially, to the society at large, the family, and beyond. So on that note, I'm going to stop here, and of course we will interact further after some time, but I'm going to be requesting the other speaker we have today, Dipanjan, who will share with us his perspectives on this subject. And Dipanjan, I welcome you to share your perspectives, and also if you have certain comments on anything that I've spoken so far, feel free to share those ideas as well.
Sure. So thanks a lot, Uma, and thanks to CII for organizing this event. I mean, I typically get invited to events when there's either a crisis or an opportunity that I'm pursuing. So I must say it's a very welcome break for me. Now, I can't, of course, see the participants who are there on the audio call, but I have a lot of fresh, young, talented faces looking at me in the room. What strikes me is not the number of women, but the number of men in this room. That itself, I would say, is a clear indicator of two things. Number one, the acceptance level of women in workplace, and more importantly, the topic that we are discussing today, how relevant it is to all of us, irrespective of our gender. So good. I mean, just looking at you gives me the encouragement and the confidence to talk about things that are very close to my heart. Now, while I was hearing Uma speak, and the wonderful speaker that she is, I tend to get lost in the messages that she is giving across. But there are certain things that absolutely stood out for me. See, if you look at my background, I mean, I've been in IT all my life. I mean, unlike my parents, etc., my father, their generation who worked in factories, it's been a very literally an air-conditioned life for me, right? But in the IT world, when you're an engineer coming out of college, what you really dream of is going to the US. Right? I mean, if you go back to the pre-Y2K years, I mean, the only reason we were working was somehow I have to land up in the US. And through some chance, through a bit of merit, through a bit of luck, I landed up in the US. I was, of course, working for Zensar at that time too. And I happened to work in a customer account, which even today is a leader in their particular field. They're in the high-tech and electronics field. And the first thing that struck me when I started getting involved in my work were the difference in meetings that were conducted by the customers. If the customer manager were a woman, the meeting would get conducted differently. I'm not saying better. The men would conduct it differently. So just to give you the man's perspective of it first. Suppose there's a half-an-hour meeting. The first 10 minutes would go in discussing the latest baseball game, what went wrong, what they could have done better. The next 10 minutes would be discussing what are the plans for the weekend, where are you going, have you tried out this new beer. The last 10 minutes would be discussing what we came in for. And invariably, we would neither reach a decision, nor would we have clarity on the next steps. All that we would agree is to meet again next day. Next, when it comes to a woman manager conducting a meeting, even before we came into the meeting, there would be a note in our mailboxes. This is what we are going to discuss. Be ready. And that be ready used to be a bit of a stern message that you better be ready. Okay? You get into it. Very, very well, I would say, organized 30 minutes. First 5 minutes, recapping where we left the last meeting. Next 5 minutes, discussing the action plans that came out. Next 15 minutes, getting into the core of the issues. What had to be resolved, what didn't have to be resolved. Last 5 minutes, if time permits, after you have identified the next steps for the next meetings, discussing personal stuff. And I tell you, we used to leave the meetings with a clear, I would say, sense of direction. That was wonderful. And later on, I started thinking, why is it so? Why do women conduct it differently and the men, excuse me, are so lousy at it? And when I started getting to know some of these women managers a bit personally, as I spent a number of years with them, their answer was very simple. Look, as soon as this meeting is over, I got to drive out of office. I have to go pick up my kids from school, or at least make sure that I am at home before they come. There are other things that I have to attend to before my evening calls start. If I don't manage my time properly, it's not just my organization or my career that suffers. My kids suffer. And I think I'll tell you that resonated. So for me, that was a very, very clear difference between the way, I would say, a woman was conducting and the way a man was conducting a meeting. And I'll tell you, I worked in the US, I worked in UK, I worked in Singapore, I worked in India, I worked in China, I worked in Hong Kong, I worked in Middle East, I worked in South Africa. What I see as a very, very refreshing difference, in the US, I would say, if I generalize, women rule. Especially in the high-tech industry, in the IT industry, it's dominated by women. In the UK, and it's very, very, I would say, unusual. In the government sector, there aren't too many women. But if you look at and then in the power generation utility sector, something that I've worked in very closely, there weren't too many women. But again, if you look at IT, it was completely dominated by women, and especially consultants. So I saw a very, very different style of working of women in US as well as in UK. Some of the things that while Uma was speaking, I noted, she talked about the fact that you shouldn't come into work with a lot of baggage. I cannot overemphasize the importance of it. And sometimes I've also had the experience of working directly under women managers. I'll tell you where I did not enjoy working. I've always enjoyed working for demanding managers. People who challenged me to do things that I myself didn't think I was ready to do. But some of my women managers, their whole aim in life was to prove that they were better than male managers, not to prove that they were good or competent managers. And there you can make out the difference, right? You can be demanding, but when you are being demanding for a different set of reasons, it was not just me. It was very, very difficult for the team to really work together. So I just gave you a different perspective of it. And I mean, if there are any, I know we have some time later on also. If you have some questions, etc., I'll be more than happy to talk about it. Uma, over to you.
Thank you, Deepanjan. Every time I listen to Deepanjan, I really come away with this appreciation of how Deepanjan has been able to elicit some very meaningful insights from every one of his interactions, be it in India or other parts of the world where he has had the opportunity to work with people from different culture. And the last time Deepanjan and I were on a similar panel on another subject, but again related to women at workplace, we had some very interesting dialogue on how do we handle different situations at workplace. So Deepanjan, let's talk about some of these typical situations that we face, and let's talk about your perspectives, and let me also share with you some of the experiences that we have had in our organization or I would have had in the past. You know, very often when you mentioned about demanding managers, we have in every organization, we have demanding goals. We have to achieve certain activity within a certain limit, within a certain target, within a certain budget of maybe resources or time, and that is a goal. If you don't achieve, then obviously the overall goal of the organization, which may be revenue or profit or whatever, is not achieved. So in such a situation, let's say if we have a man and a woman who are both working towards the same goal, I've always found that the focus with which the man would work with respect to this sort of a goal, and the focus with which a woman works with this sort of a goal is very different. You did mention that, yes, I mean, I have to finish this work and then go home because I have to pick up my kid, etc. you mentioned. But when it comes to pressures on account of, let's say, achieving revenues or this month's sales quota that I have to achieve, we find that very often men are able to somehow hang in there. Whether or not they have been able to achieve their targets is a different matter, but they are able to somehow hang in there. But women, they would try maybe month 1, month 2, and then month 3 they feel, you know what, maybe this job is not cut out for me, or maybe there's something wrong with my boss, and therefore I better change my job. So this is something that we do find sometimes at workplace. I like to know whether you have found a similar experience. Again, I'm not generalizing. I'm sure that we have what I just said. I mean, if you flip it on both sides, you would have women extremely focused and you would have some men not so focused. But by and large, if I were to look at the underlying, I would say the characteristics of a man is at workplace, I find that he is able to somehow hang in there and he knows that he has to somehow get there. But women feel there could be other alternatives, and why should I do this? So what is your take on this?
That's a particularly difficult question to answer, but I'll talk again from my experience. If you look at the work culture in India, even today, and I don't know whether you'll agree or not, but these are my own views, an unemployed man is a bigger stigma than an unemployed woman. Would you agree, by and large? So sometimes what happens, and I've seen it in a lot of my own colleagues, my peers as well as people who are part of my team, even if they hated the work, and I'm talking of men, even if they knew they were not giving their best, there was still tremendous pressure and responsibility to at least carry on. On the other, another similar things, I've also had the experience of working with single mothers, right, for whom they were the father and the mother combined. They had a similar mentality because they also knew that I don't have any option. So irrespective of whether I hate my boss, detest my job, I still have to slug it out. But when honestly a job is an option for a woman, there will always be an exit door available. I'm not sure if I'm stoking the fire out here, but that is absolutely what I have seen. Okay? There is, I would add another perspective to it. And this is a very different, again, style that I have seen in working with men managers and women managers. Maybe I'm using the word managers a bit loosely, decision makers. The one area where I insist that I have women in my team is in risk identification. By and large, maybe I'm generalizing again, I have seen women have that eye for detail. And especially if I'm getting into a new project, a new opportunity, where maybe I have 60% or 50% of clarity on what I'm getting into and the rest is fuzzy, the ability of a woman to really kind of carve out some kind of certainty out of that uncertainty, men can't. Men will get impatient after some time and they'll just toss a coin and say, chalo, let's do it. Sometimes they land in trouble and sometimes they're resounding success. And similarly, when I've seen women actually doing a very objective analysis, doing a risk identification, sometimes they're unable to take a decision. They get caught into, if I do this, what will happen? If I don't do this, I may be in trouble. Sometimes you just need to trust your instincts, your gut feel, and take a decision. Now, if you're doing it at every time, God help your company. But there are times when you absolutely need to take that decision. I have seen that some men, I think, tend to be a bit more of risk takers. I might even use the word gambler to a certain extent, but calculated gambles, I think men are a bit better at. And since I started talking on this line, since I talked about the fact that I have seen women generating more value in risk identification, there is another aspect of my job where I have seen women to be significantly better and effective. Uma touched upon it, confrontation. For us, when I'm dealing with customers, clients, prospects, the biggest confrontation is negotiating commercials or negotiating clauses. I think all of you in some stage or the other would have seen it. And if you leave it to the men, they will start off in a very polite way, they will get into slightly argumentative tones, and finally there will be bad blood, there will be a lot of heated words flying around and no decision taking. But the way a woman can negotiate, and I'm saying both on the customer side as well as on the provider side, I think is far more objective and factual. For every negotiation, especially for a large deal, I make sure that the team that is meeting the prospect, that there is at least a certain amount of women who can negotiate certain things. And if I have the time to plan properly for a negotiation meeting, and not always do I have the luxury of planning for it, but when I do, I make sure I identify who negotiates what point. And some of the more contentious ones, I usually dump it on the girls. And that is the biggest compliment I can give to all my women colleagues.
Okay, that's interesting, Dipanjan, when you say you leave the most complex part of negotiation to women. But that brings me to another interesting dimension. You know, we've talked about the work dynamics. You have men as supervisors of women or women as supervisors of men. But what about women as supervisors of women? Oftentimes, I have found that women do not mind bossing over men, and women do not mind being bossed over by men, but women do not like being bossed by another set of women. Is that true? So there is something intrinsically there in women where they resist other women. So is that something very peculiar that I am saying, or rather, I would like to get the man's perspective here, because I'm sure you would have observed in your organization, and both with within your own organization and at customers' end, similar situations. What is your take on this, Dipanjan, as to why you think women resist women managers?
Okay. Now, this is something I have definitely come across multiple times. And what I've seen is when a woman manager is managing women, if I may use the word subordinates, I think she sets the bar not only high, but she becomes the ideal state. I mean, that, to put it bluntly, is wrong. You cannot expect just because you have women in your team to absolutely emulate and copy you. It is wrong. You have to respect diversity, and when I say diversity, it is not just gender diversity, but personality diversity. Each person should have a different way of doing it. You have to respect that. And boy, have I seen sparks flying. And these sparks are, by the way, global. There's nothing very regional or local about these sparks. It can be very, very detrimental. And at the same time, I have seen how some very, very smart women managers have bridged these kind of situations. Whenever I have seen women managers building a personal connect with women team members, and it could be very, very different. It could be over a common pastime that they have. It could be even in the US I have seen a common church that they go to. The moment there is a common bridge that they are able to establish, I see that the understanding of the two personalities improves significantly, and frankly the whole project then goes off smoothly. But not everybody, not every manager has the maturity to really do it that well. Because if you can't handle it, it will boomerang on you very, very bad. I hope that kind of answers your question, Uma.
Well, there are no right or wrong answers, but yes, I mean, it's important to recognize for a woman who is managing other women, that you shouldn't begin by assuming that you are going to be the role model. There are different styles of working, and the success of a manager is to manage the diversity and bring the best out of people. And this is one area where I think as we go along and as we find in India in particular more women assuming leadership roles, we will require particular attention to this aspect, and I think women will benefit a great deal in terms of coaching for managing other women members in their teams. I want to now talk about another slightly, you can say, political subject. I'm saying political twist because, you know, when 5 men get together and you watch them near, let's say, in a coffee shop, or they go out for a cigarette, or they are at the water cooler, then you say, well, these guys are scheming. They are up to something. Really? Okay? That's a general assumption. But when 5 women at the workplace, they get together, you say they are gossiping. So, which is true, according to you? I mean, when 5 women get together, do they, I mean, is it correct to assume? Is it the fact? Or what is your take on this?
I don't know why she reserves these questions for me. I mean, I'm going from stickier to stickier wickets. But yes, whether you like it or not, unfortunately, if you see some women coming together, the immediate impression is, yeah, they're gossiping. And by the way, it's a complete myth that men don't gossip. We are, and trust me, we are better at it. We do it slightly differently. And yes, we sometimes need some, I would say, accessories with us, whether it's in the form of smoke or something that comes in a glass. But yes, we can gossip about it. But are men good at scheming? I mean, that is something I would really think of. I'm yet to have come across a scheme that has been successfully hatched by a group of men. I'm sorry, but I have not come across that. But anyway, let me now go to a slightly different point. I mean, while I was hearing you think, there's an incident that happened to me about 7 years ago, which I just want to throw at you and just want to get your views, because till date, I have not been able to reconcile myself with the decision that I had taken. So this was again, I was working for on behalf of Zensar, I was working for a very large customer in the US again. I was actually program managing on the client's behalf a very, very complex large program. And I had people who were part of the customer base itself, full-time employees. I had contractors, I had people from Zensar. It was a very, very large team. I just happened to be from Zensar managing the overall program. Now, while it was a very large team, the timelines were very short. I think if I still remember, it was about a 3.5 month kind of a project, a very, very critical crunch project. There were a couple of roles that were specialist roles. There was one particular architect role which I knew would make or break the whole project. I needed that person to be onboarded in the first week itself. And I was already way past the first month. I had not even been able to identify that person from the market. I think all of you have been through similar situations if you have been in projects, right? Then finally, I found this candidate, and she was a woman who was an absolute dream come true when it came to matching the skills that I was looking for. I mean, she was perfect. At the same time, and this is what I appreciate about the American work culture, the candidate clearly said that I'm in my 3rd trimester. I'm going to have my baby probably in another 2 months from now, and that was my crunch period. There was no way I could afford to lose even a single person in my project, let alone that specialist, in 2 months' time. I mean, I tell you, for 2 nights, it bothered me. On one hand, I had to appreciate the fact that she was honest. She had not hidden anything from me. She could easily have hidden it. And the laws being what they are, you cannot stop, you cannot prevent a woman from going on maternity leave whether you like it or not. On the other hand, I have a responsibility towards my customer. I have to deliver this program. So after spending 2 nights agonizing over it, I referred it to the HR of that particular customer. Because obviously it was something very, very sensitive. Now, I don't think even for an organization of that size, it's a Fortune 100 company, they had also not come across a situation like this. So they debated, they gave me a very, very, I would say, politically correct statement, saying that you cannot have any bias towards any kind of gender out here. You have to choose what is the best possible thing for you. And I knew for sure that if this woman, I onboarded her, and if she went for her maternity leave as planned, I would be dead. I still took a call and went ahead and onboarded her. Okay? That, and trust me, we were at a week before going live. She had to go on maternity leave. So imagine my state. I mean, I knew it would happen. I had tried to create backup, but I simply, not every superstar can be backed up, right? And this person just, no matter what contingency I threw, I couldn't do it. So this lady, she took leave. 2 days later, she had a healthy baby. And I'll tell you, I'll never forget this. She comes home from hospital, calls me up and says, I'll not be able to come to office, but I'll deliver your program. That day I was proud of myself. Even today, as I'm saying, I'm telling you, the hair is standing on my end. It was such a difficult decision to take. But 2 days after childbirth, back at home, just 4 hours of work per day from that woman. I missed my deadline by 2 days. I mean, after that, I didn't do any more program management for that particular customer. But that, I tell you, was an experience. And what I truly learned was, and what she told me later on, was the fact was that you did not discriminate against me. I knew I was landing you in a situation. And why do you think I don't have any accountability and responsibility towards the project also? And it goes without saying, the birth of my child is the most important thing that can happen to me, and it's my first child. But don't think that given a choice, I'm going to ditch the project. And by the way, she was off contract. Some US laws can be ruthless. You go on maternity leave, sometimes, and if you're a contractor, you are off contract anymore. She was under no obligation. But when I talk about having this personal connect built on mutual respect, this is the one example that keeps coming back to me whenever I go through similar situations, if not the exact one. I thought I'd just share this perspective with you.
That's really brilliant example, Deepanjan, you shared about a woman who was fully accountable and who demonstrated her accountability and her responsibility in an astounding fashion. Well, that is what I guess organizations expect from everybody, even in the normal course of work. But very often we find that even in normal situations there is a difference in terms of why people, there are some people who feel much more responsible, who want to own stuff, and there are others who do not. And particularly since our focus of discussion today is about women's success and how do we help them succeed at workplace, there are organizations who do appreciate that women have these special needs of having to balance their home responsibilities and let them work from home. And therefore, whatever is the responsibility that a woman has, she is able to take it along with her to her home, and even though she may not be physically at work, thanks to technology, is able to address some of those requirements from home after work as well. Yet, this brings up sometimes questions at the workplace as to whether this is being treated, whether the woman is being treated, given a special, you can say, privilege, and sometimes gets into, even discussion mode at the time of considering promotions or confirmations, and at the time of appraisals. Very often this question comes up as to whether we really saw the woman demonstrating 100% her interest in the job, in the assignment that was given to her. And therefore, when it comes to looking at when do I need to promote this lady, sometimes HR in some companies would say, well, let's give her 1 more year, instead of saying, well, this might have been the reason but she has demonstrated well, even though she was not physically present at workplace. So what I'm trying to say here is that what you visibly feel, what you visibly experience, sometimes becomes the measure of using which you determine how effective an individual has been at workplace. And this at times works to the disadvantage of women, even though there may be policies which may be supporting and favoring women to work from home. And all that I can say here is that we should be conscious of this, and we have to bring about the change in our mindset to recognize that unless to recognize that it is not necessary that you have to be physically in the office for those 8 hours or 9 hours. And when the organization permits you to take some work home, and so long as you're able to deliver that, that should be considered as a meaningful contribution. So in some organizations there is this culture that work time may be 9 to 5, 9 to 6, whatever, but the real work actually begins after 6. And therefore those who can stay on beyond 6 o'clock and can show that they're really busy, really working hard, are the ones who get the necessary credit. And very often women are not able to do that because they come on the dot 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, whatever is the office time, and they manage to pack in a lot more work during the prescribed number of hours. There is hardly, if the lunch break is half an hour, you go for 20 minutes, come back, finish your work. So you're able to finish most of your work or whatever is being assigned to you in the given time, and therefore they do not have the time to stay back at work, quote unquote, do networking, which in a way also helps in your promotion and in getting ahead in your career. So I have heard very often women complain of this fact that they are not able to do enough networking beyond the regular office hours because of one of this could be the reason, and the other reason is because I don't smoke, I don't drink, and therefore how do I get into that gang? So in such situations, some women feel at a disadvantage, but then there are other women who manage to succeed even though these kind of situations they also face. So how do these women become successful? And I can give you some examples from my experience, both positive and negative. One example is, I know of women who are so diligent in their work that their work speaks for themselves. The work speaks for them, rather than having to project themselves or having to necessarily do that socializing after office hours. There is also this whole myth that unless you go out and you're partying, you are not going to be seen. While partying and going out is not necessary for promoting oneself, it is definitely important from the perspective of getting to know others, and therefore I would imagine that women have to make the time, men and women both will have to find the time after office hours to get to know each other more from the perspective of having to work together and form better bonding, better team building situations. That is something that we have to find time and find bandwidth to figure that out. So those are my takeaways, Dipanjan, on this whole issue of networking. And networking is not just restricted to socializing after office hours. Networking is also participating in conferences and building professional relationships with others in the industry. Forums like Indian Women's Network or CII and other industry forums. And in today's context, we have social media, which also provides a wonderful opportunity to network for professional growth. That is something that women have to actively embrace, which will become crucial as we look at growing within the organization and within the industry. And that has to be a very conscious attempt. No amount of, other rationale that you may provide because of which this networking is not possible is something that we'll have to put aside and have to make a conscious attempt to make this happen. And as I said right at the start, this is important both for men and women. For men, it might be somewhat easier. For women, it may not be that easier. But women have to find a way, and there are various ways in which other women have been able to do it, so we may have to emulate them to make that happen. I want to get into another tricky subject, which is how do we deal with conflicts? You did mention, Dipanjan, that you found women to be better in some sense in terms of dealing with negotiations. But I feel that when it comes to handling conflicts, there are some challenges women face. You find sometimes men are aggressive. Sometimes you find women women are not fully geared to deal with situations which are fuzzy. Although you said out of fuzziness they are capable of identifying some concrete elements, but in conflict situations when there are fuzzy elements, that could be an area where they might find themselves at a disadvantage. Then there are men who are aggressive, or there are you can say certain situations where the decisions may lead to certain you can say more complex scenarios which women have not experienced before, are not able to fathom. So in such situations, how do women actually see themselves? And have you experienced women in such situations, and in what way you think a male colleague, a peer or a supervisor can help women in such situations? And since we have large number of women who are getting there in terms of decision making, in terms of leadership position, some help for women to figure out how they can deal with this conflict situation will go a long way in making them successful leaders. So I would like you to share some thoughts, and thereafter I would be happy to share some thoughts on this subject.
No, absolutely, and this is something that I think will surface time and again. It is bound to happen. I mean, I myself have been through similar situations on multiple times, and especially sometimes, and it happens very often during appraisals, right? And if the person being appraised is male and the appraiser is a woman, there are times when the appraisee, the male, the man, is so physically aggressive and vocal, sometimes women managers do feel intimidated. And I'll tell you, I cannot say this as a global one solution that solves all, but if as a woman manager, as a woman leader, you are in this kind of a situation, ask for help. Ask for help from male colleagues who you trust, who you respect. They can give you perspectives about how to deal with such personalities. Because a man may understand certain attributes of a man better than a woman. And if you reach out to the right people, repeatedly saying people you trust and you respect, they may not all be your mentors. If you are lucky enough to have a mentor, by all means reach out. But even some of your colleagues, even some of your other subordinates, if you take them into confidence, ask for help in dealing them with the situation, nobody is going to rebuff you. I think people will understand that you're in a genuine situation, you will get out for help. But you need to ask for help. If you keep it bottled inside yourself and you think you are this superwoman who is capable of handling any situation that comes your way, I don't think it is going to work. See, one good thing about us men is we don't take ourselves so seriously. When we know we are likely to get into a problem, a situation, we shout. Set aside your ego, set aside your prestige and everything, ask for help. I don't think women are still good at that. And the reason I can tell you this is, in my at least 18 years in this organization, I've been fortunate enough to have some very, very trusted relationship with some women. Some are way junior to me, couple are senior to me, some are my peers, but we have this close network, and quite often I've realized they have used me as a bouncing board to understand how to deal with a situation. And I have not resisted it at all, because it helps me also deal with similar situations. I mean, an aggressive man on the other side of an appraisal table, I could have a similar situation when I'm appraising a woman who is using her emotions to give a different message. And it can be very, very tricky and sensitive for a man as well out there. So unless I also know how to deal with such situations, I'm sorry, I'm going to make an absolute fool of myself and make a mockery of the appraiser. I think that's something I've definitely gone through multiple times.
Yeah, Dipanjan, I would like to add here that you made a very good point about women have a tendency, man has a tendency to shout when there is a pressure point, and women have a tendency to bottle up. So maybe women have to learn to do something else, like for instance, like my mother-in-law and sister-in-law I've observed, whenever they are under pressure, they would sing. They would hum a tune, and initially I used to think, we're having such a serious discussion, they're humming a tune, and then I started observing that whenever there is pressure, they release their pressure by way of, whatever tune or by humming. So maybe we'll have to discover those kind of some secret ways of releasing the pressure instead of bottling up, or sometimes it shows on a face. And that is, I think, very important. Women have a tendency to bring out our emotions immediately on our faces, whereas men will be very calm. Okay, you think I've not done the job? Okay, fine. I'll come back to you tomorrow. But women will immediately, have the tendency to start justifying, start saying why they were right, and or for that matter become very emotional, and at times even cry. And this is another subject on which, Dipanjan, I wanted to take your views. Is it okay for women to cry at work? If a woman were to cry at work, would you say a woman is feeble-hearted, a woman is incapable of managing, a woman is not supposed to bring out her emotions in the open like this? And is that a good sign of a successful manager? What is your take as a man if a woman were to cry at work for any reason?
You have to promise me you're not going to ask me any more tricky questions. Well, my wife makes me cry at home. I'm glad she's not listening to this. And the fact is that if you have really been under stress, and when I say stress, it's the kind of stress that starts from way back at the neck, reaches all the way to your jaws. Have you experienced that? Trust me, when men cry. I've done it. I've been a programmer. If you have ever written a piece of code against a deadline, it's just not compiling. You have 5 minutes left to deliver the code. When everything else fails, you cry. Either you can shout, lose your temper, beat up somebody, and when you don't have anybody, you're the only guy late at night in office, you'll end up crying. But the point is, if you're crying because you have given your best and still not succeeded, I don't think it is a matter of shame at all, and I don't think there is any misunderstanding out here. I think we all are adults. By and large, we know what is the breaking point for every person. And my question also is that if I am a manager, if I'm a leader, why have I got into a situation where people are so close to a breaking point that they have started crying? It is not just their weak personalities, it's a set of circumstances and situations that have led them into it. Then as a manager, have I preempted that? I would definitely take it on my head. And maybe I'm responsible for that situation arising, and I should definitely get better at making sure that I don't get my people to be in similar situations. How successful I will be, I don't know, but at least I'm cognizant and I'm aware that such things can happen, and it is my responsibility not to let that happen. Okay?
I'm so glad, Dipanjan, you mentioned that. Often it is the statement that we keep hearing, don't cry like a woman. Oh, I don't want to have a woman in my team because they will just start crying. If you put some pressure, they will start crying. These are statements which we sometimes make without thinking very deeply about what really makes women move. So I would think that women are fundamentally, when they are here at work, they want to really succeed. They want to give their best. That's the reason they are here. Many women, particularly at this stage of India, for many of them, this is the first time that they're in their families, in several generations before them, maybe this is the first generation which is seeing in their families women coming out to work. So they do not have any support system at their own workplace. Their parents, their husbands, their spouses, brothers, other male members in the family, they are unable to counsel them. Even women for that matter, they have not experienced. So they are not able to give them that support that is required. And typically, even if you're married, you go back, you don't want to be discussing work with your husband. So these are all very peculiar to women who are coming to workplace. And therefore, sometimes when there is a lot of pressure or when there are things that they are unable to find clarity with the way forward, and things are fuzzy, sometimes women do break down. And as you rightly said, I think it is important to take a pause and think for a while, why has this woman broken down? Or why is this woman crying? And try and understand the issues. And I can tell you one thing, that when you really sit down this woman and talk to her and try to understand what is bothering her and just get her to talk about the issues, even a woman to woman or a man to woman, there can be a sea of difference. And once that kind of a clarity emerges and the woman knows that the male manager is here, it could be a male manager, male colleague, peer, whoever, willing to listen and help, then I think we find a completely changed scenario. And as Dipanjan said, if a woman is crying every day, then there is something wrong with the manager and there is something wrong also with the woman. But if this happens occasionally, then one has to really figure out how to make sure that that doesn't happen again. So I think we have touched upon various dimensions of workplace related situations. We have talked about how do we manage conflicts, how do we de-stress the work situations, how do we find positive ideas, positive situations to be created at the workplace by both men and women coming together and appreciating each other's strengths. Before we open up the platform for questions from the audience, both those who are in the remote locations, I'm sure you would be waiting to ask various questions, and those who are here in the audience, you would also have some questions. I would like to just ask one last question to you, Dipanjan, which is, when we have talked all along today, we have discussed all along today about the golden rules of success for women. I want you to give 3 golden rules of success for men to be successful managers of women colleagues in the organization. What would be those 3 golden rules for managing women colleagues successfully?
She had to reserve this for the last, I'll tell you. But first and foremost, if you have to be a successful manager of women, as a person, do you respect women? I think that's one question you have to ask. And the reason I can tell you this is, you can make out from my surname, I'm a Bengali. The background I come from, in a middle class educated Bengali family, women call the shots. Period. Even if you go back to the first half of the last century, the early 1900s, women were not coming out of the homes, right? But within the homes, oh boy, you can't touch them. But then post-partition, when at least we in Calcutta faced a lot of influx of people from Bangladesh, the so-called refugees that we used to say. Then during the birth of Bangladesh, 1970, when there was another huge influx of people from Bangladesh who were uprooted, women had no option other than to go out with their men and start working. So for me personally, I have grown up, being, I would say, not just dominated by women all my life, and that applies to my daughter even now. But the fact is, it was always equal. But we knew, even in my household, my father would do certain things my mom would not do, and my mother would do certain things my dad would not touch. But my dad wasn't greater or bigger than my mother. I think it begins at the home. That probably is part of your culture. If you don't have it, you don't have it. Secondly, you have to, as a manager, irrespective of whether you're dealing with men and women, understand each one of your team members' true strengths and weaknesses. and play to their strengths and make sure that their weaknesses are complemented by somebody else. And third, and again this will not be, I would say, specific to women, if you have to be a successful leader of people, you have to give them a common sense of cause to believe in. And sometimes I'll tell you, a crisis is the best thing to bind people together. Today, after 18 years in this company, I have a core team of people, 90% of whom don't even work in my group. But we have worked together through the last 18 years in multiple projects. In a crisis, the bond that you form, the respect that you acquire for each other, that continues throughout your career. Even some of them are not even in Zensar. I think if you can do these three things, start from home and build it outwards, I think you will be a very, very successful manager and, more importantly, a respected leader.
Thank you. And now maybe we can open the floor for questions.